The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hey everyone, thank you again for joining us for another webinar for ActiveReports. As you know, we just released ActiveReports 14 this week, and we're excited to go over some of the new features included in ActiveReports 14. My name is Mateen Firoz. I am the product manager for the ActiveReports product line. Joining me is Troy Taylor, the product manager for ActiveReports JS. Troy, say hi.
Hello, everyone.
Hey, Troy. All right, so if you guys don't know, by the way, if you don't know about ActiveReports JS, this is a pure client-side serverless implementation of ActiveReports. So check that out if you haven't already taken a look at the product page for that. Also on the panel, we have Evan Warren, our ActiveReports customer engagement engineer. Evan?
Hello, everyone.
And we also have Tyler Barlock, who is also on the customer engagement team working on ActiveReports and spread products.
Hello.
Hey, Tyler. Hey, Evan. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started today. Okay, so what are we going to do today? Today, we're very quickly going to take a look at some questions that we always get during the webinar and after the webinar, and when we're discussing ActiveReports with our customers. So we're going to cover a couple of those frequently asked questions. We're going to then dive right into the topics. Each one of us on the panel, we've picked some of our favorite features in ActiveReports 14 to discuss during the webinar. But the list that we have here is not the exhaustive list, doesn't include all of the features of ActiveReports 14. There just wouldn't be enough time for that. There's a lot more that's included in this release of ActiveReports, and we'll highlight some of these towards the end of the presentation. So in this webinar, I'll start off by discussing the .NET Core support with ActiveReports, big news, and how it benefits you. Tyler is going to go over the AcroForms support. Troy is going to discuss the web designer and how to create data sources and data sets in the web-based report designer. And then finally, Evan will go over the utility and the usefulness of the banded list control in that same web-based report designer. And then we'll wrap up with some Q&A. And by the way, if you happen to have questions throughout this presentation, please feel free to jot down your questions, send them to us. You don't have to wait till the end of the session for the Q&A. GoToWebinar has a question panel. Write your questions there, and we will be able to respond to your questions as time permits and as they come in. And if we don't get to any questions, then we'll get back to you, email you back with the answers to those questions. All right, so very quickly, let's go to the FAQs. So the very first question, I guess, Evan, I'm sure you get this a lot more than the rest of us. Customers often ask you, where can I find ActiveReports? Do you have a link for it? So what would you say?
You can get the link to ActiveReports 14 on our website. It's scrapecity.com/ActiveReports. Once you get to the site, you'll be able to see a quick download link for ActiveReports 14. You can get started from there.
Perfect. Thank you. And then Troy, is it possible to install multiple versions of ActiveReports side by side?
Absolutely. You can install the latest ActiveReports 14 alongside previous versions, including ActiveReports 13, 12, and so on.
Perfect. Thank you. And Tyler, how do I know if I'm eligible to get a free copy of ActiveReports 14?
You'll be eligible for the free copy of ActiveReports 14 if you have ActiveReports 13 with maintenance.
All right, perfect. Thank you. And then finally, I know we always get this question during our webinars. Will I be able to get a copy of this presentation, of this PowerPoint, of these samples? And yes, we will be sending out the recording of the webinar, any samples that we create during the webinar while we're demoing the features, along with this PowerPoint presentation to you guys. So you will receive that a week or so after this webinar ends, and you will receive that in an email, all packaged up nicely for you. So now that we have answered some of your questions that we always are asked, I want to take a minute of your time to ask you a question. So we have a very quick poll for you. If we can go ahead and launch the poll, essentially asking you what your current work entails. Are you working on desktop applications? Are you working on web applications? Are you working on both? And are you working on adopting .NET Core? So we'll give everybody a minute to answer these questions before we end the poll and share the results. All right. Very good. So it looks like we have the majority of the answers provided. Everybody pretty much answered the poll. And interestingly, the majority of us are working on both applications, both desktop and web applications. And about a third of us are interested in .NET Core, in the process of adopting .NET Core. Great. Thank you guys for answering this poll. Let's go ahead and get back to our presentation real quick. So what we're going to do, we're going to get right into .NET Core support. So .NET Core first. Let's sort of go over what .NET Core is, how it got started, and all of this. So essentially, .NET Core, you can understand it to be an upgrade, a successor to the existing .NET full framework. It offers a lot more benefits that the full framework does not offer. And because of these benefits, a lot of the developers have very quickly adopted to .NET Core. And the benefits are both from a technology and a business perspective. So .NET Core originally started in 2016 as as essentially ASP.NET Core, as V1. And this has continued on progression. So V2 and current version is V2.2.8. And this version of .NET Core is going to be supported until Monday, December 23rd. So that's a couple of days from now. And then in September, Microsoft released .NET Core 3. .NET Core 3 introduced support for WinForms and WPF desktop applications. And the next version is not going to be .NET Core 5. It is essentially going to be .NET 5. So no .NET Core, no .NET Framework, just .NET 5. And this is to eliminate any confusion, with full framework 4 as it is right now. So it'll be called .NET 5, and it's slated to be released sometime in November of next year. And preview is going to be sometime in the summer, as we have been told. Okay, so continuing on, the benefits that .NET Core offers are, there's a lot of benefits there over the full .NET framework. First and foremost, as we all know, .NET Core is a open source library, whereas full framework is proprietary to Microsoft. And again, as we all know, with .NET Core, you can develop and deploy apps on Linux and Mac, and as well as Windows. .NET Full Framework, of course, does not support Mac and Linux. One point there is to keep in mind that .NET Core Desktop currently does not support running on Linux and Mac machines. Another benefit of .NET Core is that you can package your .NET Core libraries in your application when you're deploying. So essentially, what that means is that when you deploy your application and you package all of the .NET Core assemblies, you can have multiple applications running on the same server with multiple versions of .NET Core. So it doesn't rely on the version that's installed on the machine. Now, beyond all of this, .NET Core also offers, much better performance. It offers several features which are built in, for example, like JavaScript framework support, enhanced Razor markup with HTML. So there's a lot of features that .NET Core offers, and it is the future of essentially .NET development. And we're glad to have ActiveReports at the forefront of this new feature. So how does ActiveReports and .NET work together? Let's discuss that real quick. So ActiveReports 14, with this release, supports the full power, the full flexibility, all of the features that we've discussed of the latest .NET Core frameworks. So now you can create, for example, multi-platform applications and services by implementing the ActiveReports reporting engine, or in all of the components, if you like, directly in your .NET Core application without having any Windows dependencies. You can run your reports on Windows, Mac, and Linux with ease. So this means that ActiveReports is a real multi-platform reporting solution. You can deploy your projects to the cloud if you like, or create lightweight serverless reporting applications. Also, as I mentioned, .NET Core also supports, ActiveReports also supports the desktop pack of .NET Core. So you can benefit, for example, from side-by-side deployments and native compilation of your applications. So very quickly, this is huge news for ActiveReports and obviously for some of our users as well. And we're very excited to share this with you guys. With that said, I'm going to pass it off to Tyler to discuss AcroForms. Tyler?
Thanks, Mateen. So yeah, the next feature we're going to look at is AcroForms. So what is AcroForms? Adobe describes AcroForms as a combination of two items. The first item is a traditional PDF that defines the static layout and graphics of the form. And the second item is an interactive form field that's bolted on top with form tools of the Adobe Acrobat program. So what does this all mean? Well, it basically means that AcroForms will allow your users to create editable PDFs. As you can see in the picture to the right, you have a text box, which is the zip and postal code. Below that is the input field, and once this is exported to a PDF, you will be able to enter a string in there. There's also another input field directly below that, which is the checkbox, which will allow your users to check and uncheck the box, depending on what they want. AcroForms is a newly implemented feature for ActiveReports. This was recently added in AR14 due to many customers asking for to be able to create editable PDFs. So yeah, let's take a look at the controls. All right, so hold on one second. So AcroForms is supported with our end user designer, our Visual Studio designer, and our web designer. It supports RDL and page reports. So if you're referencing the picture on the previous slide, we did add that input field, and you'll be able to pick between the two controls in the properties to select either a text box or checkbox, whichever one you want. And the text box has a bunch of useful properties. I listed them below, such as the field name, max length, multi-line, password, read-only, required, and spell check. And also, the checkbox has check style, field name, read-only, and required. Common use case for these controls would be, let's say you wanted to create a document such as a W-2 form where the end user fills in information and checks certain checkboxes, and they kind of want to give it back to you with all the information filled in. This would be perfect. So just kind of going off that, I'm going to give you guys a very quick demo on our new designer using both of these controls. All right, so here we are. Over here, you have your input field. This was just recently added. If you click and drag, you'll see that over here, your input type, you have text and a checkbox. These are your two options. So to kind of save some time, I already created a form here that has just some of the properties, just so you guys can kind of see how this works. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to preview, and you're going to export this. 1 second. sure it's PDF. Click OK. And we'll call it ActiveReports. Call it ActiveReports sample. That's fine. Save it. All right. Open this up. All right, so as you can see here, you have your max length. I set this as 6, so you type in any string, it's going to stop after 6 characters. You have your multi-line. You can type in multiple lines of text. Your password is pretty cool. So if you type in password, it's hidden. Your characters are hidden unless you click on this little button, and it kind of shows your password. And then, of course, like a read-only is basically just a checkbox or a text box. You can't edit anything in that field. And then the checkboxes, I kind of just want to show you guys the different styles that we have. And of course, you have that read-only too, where you can't change this box. So kind of to wrap this up, I'm going to show you a form that I created that's complete. This is kind of what essentially you can make with using these 2 controls. And, you know, your users would be able to fill this in, send it back. It's a pretty useful tool. So I am going to now hand it off to Troy.
All right, thanks, Tyler. So, hey everyone, my name is Troy, and what I'm going to be covering today is some new features that have been added to the Web Designer. And it's mainly centered around data. So we've added a data panel that allows you to configure data sources and data sets within the Web Designer. So as you may know, you can embed the Web Designer as a component into your web applications. And this basically gives your users or your end users the ability to design reports. So in this release, we've added the data source and data set configuration ability. So your end users will have a little bit more flexibility with the reports that they create. So let's first clarify what data sources and data sets are. A data source identifies the location of a data file or server containing the data. Data sources are supported from various providers in ActiveReports 14 Web Designer, including JSON, ODBC, and SQL clients, and we'll take a look at those shortly. On the other hand, you have a data set, which is a set of data that results from a query. So it's a subset of the data from your data source. And data sets can have fields that, or basically have fields that correspond to the values you want to display in your reports or that you may want to manipulate with the report controls. So let's go ahead and take a look at the Web Designer. And while we're bringing that up, just a couple other things about data sources and data sets. You can configure multiple data sources on a single report, so you can have data from different locations and pull them into the same report so you can get a more complex report visualization. You can also add multiple data sets within a single report as well. So here we are with the report designer now. All right, so if you take a look on the right-hand side, there's an icon here for data, and if you click that icon, you'll be able to see the new data panel, which is the home to the data sources, data sets, and parameters that you may want to add to your report. So let's start by adding a data source. So we'll click the Add button, and as we can see here, there's various providers available if I open this drop-down. So we're going to select the first option as a SQL client, and I'll leave the name the same for now. So I'm going to go ahead and enter some information to connect to the data service, and once I do that, I'll test the connection to make sure that we're connected to the right data source, and then we'll be able to choose our database. All right, our connection succeeded. So now if I click this drop down, I can see the available databases on that server. So I'm going to choose the Northwind database and add this data source. All right, so now our data source appears in the data sources section. So the next step is to create our data set. So we'll click the little plus icon next to the data source we just created, and the data source or the data set dialog will appear. And as we mentioned earlier, the data set is a resulting query. So we have to construct a query here in order to get the fields that we want. So since we're using a SQL client provider, I need to create a SQL query. So I'll use a select statement, and we'll get everything from the products table. And I'm going to name this data set products. So if I validate this query, we should be able to see the available fields under bound fields. So I'll extend this. And these are the fields that we want to use. So let's go ahead and click OK, and our data set will be added in the data set section. So this is pretty easy to use, very intuitive. So you add your data source to connect to your data, and then you add your data set to get the values that you want to use in your report. So let's go ahead and use some of those. I'm going to add a table here to our report and just add a few configuration options. So we have 3 different rows here. There's a header row, a details row, and a footer row. I'm going to remove the footer row since we don't need that now. The details row is where you want to actually bind your field. That way, the table can automatically populate rows based on the records that you have. What's also nice is as I click this icon in the cell, I can just select the field that I want, and the header row will automatically populate with that field name. So I'll just go ahead and add a few more fields here. And I'll add one more column so I can get this last field in. Unit price. All right, a little space. The one last thing that I want to do, just to add some styling to this report, is to give the price some formatting so we can actually somewhat distinguish the values that are being displayed in this table. So I click on the cell containing unit price, go to the properties panel, and then I'm going to go to the format property. Set the format to a currency value with 2 digits. And now if I preview this report, I see the table, I see my values listed here, and also the formatting applied to the price for each of the products. So go back. There's one other feature that we're not going to cover, but I just want to mention that parameters is another important part of this that you can use to further filter data in your reports. But all in all, adding data sources and data sets in the Web Designer is a pretty important new feature in ActiveReports 14. Your end users will have more control when creating reports online, and this also gives your report developers more flexibility and the ability to actually assign user roles when they're creating these reports. So I hope you and your users can take advantage of adding some data sources in the Web Designer and further empower your online report developers. If you have questions, please post them in the questions section and we will answer them. So next, I'm going to hand it off to Evan to talk about the new report control.
All right, thanks, Troy. So let's transition and take a look at the banded list control. So what is the banded list control? The banded list control is a free-form report control that contains 3 sections and allows users to place other controls in any of these 3 sections. There's a header section, which is located at the top. There's a detail section, which is located in the middle. And then there is a footer section, which is located at the bottom. So for the header section, this section will render once at the beginning of the banded list, and then the detail section will iterate or repeat all the data used in that area. And then the footer section, similar to the header, will render once, but at the end of the banded list. So this tool has been around for some time, and some current ActiveReports users might have used this in prior versions. However, we've enhanced this control in ActiveReports 14 to benefit the users. So some of the benefits for using this control. The banded list supports grouping, so you can organize and group your data based on fields like a name, a city, or even a state. You can control how the data regions are rendered. So you can have the data region grow vertically to accommodate your data, which is the can grow property, or you can have the region shrink if there is not enough data to fill it, which is the can shrink property. Then we also have a keep together property, which is pretty self-explanatory. It keeps all of the data in that particular section of the banded list together. Another benefit is that the control still utilizes the banded structure that's used in the section report layout. This is useful for section report users because the control makes the transition to RDL and page reports easier. Since the banded list control is now supported in the Web Designer, customers can now migrate their section reports to an RDL or page report so that they can be used in the Designer. So now let's take a look at how we can migrate our section reports to the Web Designer. So ActiveReports gives you the ability to convert existing section reports to an RDL or page report through the ActiveReports 14 tool. So this tool is an application that's provided when you install ActiveReports to your machine, regardless of if you have a professional or standard license. So the conversion process is pretty simple. First, it will ask you the input format you want. So normally you want to select the ActiveReports option since we want to convert a section report. Next, we will browse for the report we want to convert, and once we find that directory, the import wizard will prompt you with all the reports that can be converted. Then after that, we will be asked what layout we want this to be converted to. So we have the option to convert this report to an RDL report, a page report, or we can convert them to both reports. Then the last step would be to add those converted reports to the Web Designer. Now that we looked at the process, let's try it out. So I pulled up the import wizard here. So like I mentioned, it's pretty self-explanatory. Walks you through the steps. So we're going to click Next. We're going to select the ActiveReports option. And then we are going to browse for our report. So we're going to go to here. Select OK. And then you'll notice it picks up all the reports that are in this directory. So we'll just select all. We'll select Next. Then you will be given the option to select the output format you want. So if you want all reports to be RDL, page report, or even both. So for today, we're just going to look at the RDL report layout, and we're going to select Next down here. So it's going to convert, and then once it's finished, it's going to open up a file log. And basically, the file log will just tell you the process in which the report has been converted. So that's a cool new addition to the import tool. So now let's take a look at the report. Let's take a look at the report in the standalone designer, and then we'll take a look at the report converted in the Web Designer. So give me one moment here while I set that up. All right, so as you can see here, this is the report that we initially converted. So this is a section report in our new standalone designer. So this is a new feature of ActiveReports 14, and it's similar to the web designer Troy just showed you, but it's just for desktop users. So it has the same interface, and it's very useful for building reports. So we'll preview this real quick, just take a look at the data. So I just have a list of products, and then you'll see like the product ID, the product name, then some other field values for those products. So now that we've taken a look at the report, let's take a look at converting the report. So I'm going to pull up the web designer here. And now what I've initially done is I've added the report to the web designer. So the converted reports here. So it's ActiveReports 14 product report RDL. We'll open that up. And you'll see that it has similar layout to what we saw in the section report file. So we have the text boxes, but they're also in the banded list control here as well. So you'll see that the list of products is in the header section, and then you'll see the fields in the detail section, and then you'll see nothing in the footer since we didn't have anything listed there. So if we preview this, you'll see that we get the same exact output as what we saw in the standalone designer for the desktop. So this is very, very useful for when you want to convert existing section reports to the web designer, and you want to work with the web designer. So one thing I want to show you guys is that I mentioned were the can grow, can shrink properties. So we have the can grow and can shrink right here. So if we toggle that off and then we preview it again, we'll show you essentially what it does. So now you'll see that the page, that it's no longer growing to all the way down the page. It's only just displaying 10 records. And then you can also see that we have a can shrink property as well, and then the keep together property as well. We'll toggle that off, and we'll toggle this one up just to show you just the behavior of this report. So now you'll see that there's 11 records right here, rather than 10 that we saw before. So this is just a simple way you can convert, a section report to the web designer and utilize this new enhanced standard list control. So I'm going to wrap things up and then pass things off to the team.
Hey, thanks, Evan. So we have, while we get everything set back up to the presentation, we have a question here. What version of Visual Studio does ActiveReports support, and what are the differences between the standard and professional version of ActiveReports? So essentially, very quickly, I'll answer this question. ActiveReports supports Visual Studio 2013 to 2019. This is for V14. As for the differences between the professional and standard version, excuse me, the professional essentially includes the web designer, the end user report designer. It includes the JS viewer, the web viewer. So there's a lot more of the web components included in the professional version. And the standard version is more geared towards desktop development, if that helps. There's a lot more to explain to that, but for the sake of time, that is the brief explanation of the differences. Okay, continuing on to the presentation. We've covered essentially so far, we've covered the favorite features that our panelists, they're essentially favorite features of ActiveReports 14. So I talked about the .NET Core support in ActiveReports 14. Tyler talked about AcroForms. Troy discussed the data source and data set creation and the web-based report designer. And finally, Evan wrapped up with the powerful banded list control and its usability in the web designer and its utility essentially to help section report users migrate to RDL and RDL on page and start using the web designer in their web applications. But like I mentioned in the beginning of this webinar, that is not all of the features in ActiveReports 14. ActiveReports 14 came up with a lot more. So part of our enhancements to include .NET Core support, we also placed our assemblies on NuGet. So you as developers, you can update your applications much easier. So everyone on the team will be able to easily reference the same builds of ActiveReports without having essentially to run installers, right? So NuGet brings a lot of benefit in that regard. We also created a brand new standalone report designer that Evan showcased. This feature, this report designer is a very intuitive, familiar layout, so that whether you're a technical user or a non-technical user, very easy to use and easy to understand layout. Everybody will be able to use it. And then we also created a new web viewer control. This is based on our JavaScript technologies, and it can be embedded in your ASP.NET projects and display your reports to your end users. Essentially, it contains the built-in functionality for printing, for exporting, for interactivity such as parameters and drill downs and drill throughs and sorting and all of those things. And it also has three different types of viewers in one. So essentially, there is the the general HTML viewer, which will have the the border of the viewer with the toolbar and the buttons and the parameter panes and all of those things. But there's also a raw HTML viewer, which essentially will display your report without that surrounding frame of the viewer. So your report will look like it is a native part of your web page. So that is the benefit of the raw HTML viewer. And then the Acrobat viewer, obviously, will display your report as if it was a PDF document. And then finally, we made some enhancements to the web report designer that some of which Troy demoed. We also did some localization work for the web designer, so it can be extended to different cultures. And then we also improved the JS viewer as well, and most notably of those improvements includes the text search. So if you have long, large reports, spanning multiple pages, and your users are looking for a specific text, they can type that in, and the text search will essentially return matches for that string, along with the page number, and the user can click on it and navigate directly to that page. So these are essentially some of the features that came out with ActiveReports 14. So what to do from here? The next steps basically are that after this webinar, you will receive a very short 5-question survey. It will take you about 60 seconds to fill it out, but it will be very, very helpful to us for our future webinars and future product enhancements. Please do take that time to fill out that survey. It will be greatly appreciated. And then the other thing is that if you haven't already downloaded ActiveReports 14, you can do so from the link that's shown here. Go to the home page, click on the download link, it'll download, and you'll get a free 30-day trial of ActiveReports 14. You can try it out. If you have any issues during your trial period or after your trial period, our support team will be able to help out. If you need them, they'll be there for you. And once you're ready to purchase, you can contact our sales manager, Bo, at the email that's shown here, activereports.sales@grapecity.com, and he'll be able to address help you out with that sale. And then finally, we'd love to hear from you. We'd like for you to stay in touch with us, get connected. So please do follow us on Twitter, get in touch with us through our website. Excuse me. And with that said, I want to go ahead and open it up for questions. So if you have questions, please go ahead and type them into the GoToWebinar questions panel, and we'll go through and answer those questions for you. Now, there is one question that Lynn asked about converting multiple reports, converting section reports to RDL and page reports. We don't have that functionality built. Actually, I'm in communication with another customer to do exactly that. So I'm going to try to make that available. So Lynn, I will get in touch with you once I have everything figured out and we have an automation process ready. I will get in touch with you and I'll provide you the details. If anybody else is interested in this, our contact information is here. Please do send me an email. I would love to hear from you guys. So that's the Lynn's questions. There's a question. It says we have AR12 already. How much effort do we need to upgrade to V14? Okay. Evan, do you want to take that one? How hard is it to migrate to V14?
Yeah, I can take it. It's not too hard at all. So the upgrade process is pretty simple. So what you would have to do is you would have to install ActiveReports 14 or 13 on your machine, and once you have either version installed, you would go into Visual Studio and access the Tools menu item, and then select the Convert to ActiveReports 14 option. Basically, that option will allow you to upgrade existing reports, upgrade existing DLLs, references, tools and features that are being used in ActiveReports 11 to ActiveReports 14. So all in all, the process is pretty simple. You just have to utilize the conversion tool in Visual Studio.
All right, thanks. Thanks, Evan. Okay, let's see. So there is another question. Lynn is asking if section reports will be supported in the web designer. That is something we're looking at, Lynn. We do not have an ETA about that, but that is something that we are looking at doing. So, for the time being, you would benefit a lot more from RDL reports if you migrated to RDL reports. But I don't have an ETA on when and if section reports will be supported in the web designer. Okay, any other questions from anybody else? Okay.
Hey, Mateen, I just had a quick question.
Go ahead.
Hey, so just one about .NET Core. So what are some deployment options for .NET Core?
Yes, good question. Okay, thanks, Evan. So deployment options for .NET Core, essentially there are two main options. You can deploy .NET Core applications as a framework-dependent deployment. So that essentially means that you deploy your application, and your application will be referencing the version of .NET Core that is installed on the server. And the other option is to deploy as self-contained. So self-contained deployment. That's what I was referencing in one of the benefits of .NET Core, and that is essentially to package all of the .NET Core assemblies in your project. So when you deploy, your project is relying only on the version of .NET Core that is included with it. So you can have multiple applications essentially running on that server, referencing multiple self-contained versions of .NET Core. So that is the benefit of it. And that's essentially the difference between them, the different ways of deploying. So there's another question that we have also. I guess this is more for the AcroForms. Tyler, is it possible to make a table editable in a PDF document?
Yes, you can nest that input field control inside the cells of a table, and that will make it interactive.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Tyler. And one question that we actually had, and I think everybody will benefit from this, for the web-based report designer. Troy, if we have a application where multiple people are logging in, and I want some of them to have access to data sources, and I don't want others, so can I implement this type of a role-based access to data sources in the web designer?
Yes, absolutely. You can definitely control at whatever level you want the roles or the level of access that you want to have for each user logging into your application.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Thank you, Troy. All right. So we had one more question that popped up here. We were able to open print dialog box, print report from web application. I think broken because of Chrome upgrade. Is there a fix for it in AR 13 or 14? So yes, Naveen, there is a fix for it. If you download AR, I'm assuming you're using prior version of ActiveReports, but yes, you should not have this problem with the latest version of ActiveReports. I haven't heard of this in the last couple of years, any print dialog being broken. So you should be good with that. All of our viewers, all of our components support all of the major browsers. So there should not be any issue with using ActiveReports in the latest version of Chrome, i.e. Edge or Safari, whatever else. Okay, so I think that's all the questions that we've had for today. So I want to thank you guys for taking the time to join us for this webinar. We are very excited about this release of ActiveReports 14. It obviously has a lot to offer you guys, especially with the .NET Core support and all of the other features that we've discussed today, the AcroForms, the Web Designer, and the banded list control. Again, if you haven't already downloaded, please download. If you need to get in touch with us, you have our email addresses here. Please do get in touch with us. And if you need any help creating a proof of concept or getting started with ActiveReports, reach out to our support team, and we'll definitely be able to help you out and get you going with ActiveReports. Thank you very much, guys. Have a nice evening, nice afternoon, and nice morning if you are somewhere where it's morning.